Hello and welcome to our daily news analysis. We are doing the Hindu newspapers daily edition. Now, first of all, we have a news with reference to Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who was the president of Sri Lanka. In fact, if we look at this news, this is kind of an update to something that has already taken place. There was a rumor that Gotabaya Rajapaksa, considering the threat to his safety and well-being, he and his family had fled away. So there was this thing that was there in the news. And it seems now, reading this article, that he was going to the US. But since USA has rejected his visa request, he is stuck with the same place. At least that is what we get over here. Besides, we get to know that Gotabaya Rajapaksa appointed Vikramasinghe as the premier. Right, so this is it. And other than that, we get one more update on this Sri Lanka issue that the political parties that are in parliament, they have decided that amongst themselves, they will form a new governing structure that will bring them out of this trouble. Then we have an fact with reference to inflation. It's just a trend, actually, you don't have to memorize. So we have the CPI numbers, especially for the rural sector, so rural inflation, which is at 7.09%, and it has actually increased 0.01%. Okay. And in urban area, again, it is slightly on the higher side. So despite RBI taking measures to check inflation, the inflation is not coming down. And for RBI, the target has been set at 4% plus minus 2, which is 6%. And predominantly, the primary reason has been cited is the higher cost for food. So higher cost for cereals and vegetables, as well as milk, clothing, etc. Everything is expensive. Fuel. Okay. Then this is this image. You can see this. So this had been recently unveiled or revealed at the White House on Tuesday. So what is this image about? And that is important. So since it is at White House, it is actually the images that were captured by NASA. So this have been unveiled. Now, what is this image about? So it is about the Carina Nebula, which is telling us the story of the young star forming region. So it tells us as to how from a nebula is a dust of cloud and it's a cloud dust of comprising of hydrogen and helium. The thing is that the nebula is like a cluster. It is coming together because of the force of gravity. They are coming together, and ultimately it will condense and a star would be born. So it shows the previously obscured areas of the star birth. So from nebula, a star is being born, called the cosmic cliffs. So it looks like a cliff, so that's why. Within the NGC 3324, roughly 7,600 years away. And this image was captured via infrared light. So this is known as NIRCam. So NIR, Near Infrared Camera, on NASA's James Webb Space Telescope. Right, so we get it, James Webb Space Telescope. It's something that is there in the space and it is observing. Telescope is to observe the things that are far away. So that James Webb Space Telescope is associated with NASA. Next, we have the ministry takes up transgender pilot's case. So we had heard about the story of this pilot who's a girl transformed into a boy and was training. Obviously, most of the commercial pilot training takes place outside of India. So got trained and now was applying for the commercial pilot license to be eligible to fly. But the DGCA, the regulatory body, it's a regulatory body, it's a statutory body which regulates the aviation sector. It said that, see, we cannot give you the license to fly. We cannot grant you the CPL because you are on some therapy, you are on hormones. So that's why we cannot give you, because it may affect your flying ability, it may affect your judgment. But he had a problem with this. He said, no, this is a discriminatory thing because in other areas, in other countries like South Africa, US, and it's perfectly fine for us to fly. Then why are you not allowing us? Now we have an update that the Ministry of Civil Aviation, has said that the denial of the CPL to candidate is discriminatory. And it further said discriminatory and it is violative of this law, Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act. And it has told them to make special provisions for transgender people. Right? So we get it, or we get this. Now, besides this, obviously the issues and challenges faced by the transgenders remains a very, very important theme. Now, Paneer Selvam, this is yesterday's front page at the top, it was there. So he lodges complaint with the CEC. So why I'm sharing this, discussing this is, it is telling us about regulation of the political parties. So regulation of the political parties is being done by the party's own laws and the representation of the People's Act. Right? So Representation of the People Act is responsible for that. Besides, other than that, we're not really important. Okay. Now we have the PM Cares Fund is back in the news. So PM Cares Fund was launched in March 20. Let me just zoom this. So launched by the Prime Minister on March 27, 2020, given, we needed a response for the issue of COVID, we needed vaccination, we needed medicines, diagnostics, so that wasn't there. So for that, it was introduced. But there were issues about transparency, about how the funds were being used. So there were certain contentious issues. So we have one petition that has been filed that the PM Cares Fund should be declared as a public authority under the RTI. Right, so this petition has been filed with this thing over here. And it should also give out the audit reports on the PM Cares website, which they are not doing, which they should be doing. So for this, the Delhi High Court, this petition has been filed at the Delhi High Court. So the center has said that we need some times to frame our response. So we need a 4 weeks time. By the way, we have a video on the PM Cares Fund. If you wish to know more, it's on our YouTube channel as well. Delhi Metro to roll out e-autos, move towards last mile connectivity, transit-oriented development. Okay, states news now. Godavari floods, right? So same thing, flood management, political news over here. So let's go ahead. Okay, a new judicial device for complete justice. So India's top court cannot be seen helpless when faced with issues of individual liberty. Now, I'm not doing this. What is of interest to me is this issue over here. The Twitter case, which is there in the news with reference to the government, telling the Twitter to block certain accounts, certain tweets, using the clause known as Section 69 of the IT Act, which empowers the government to restrict access to online content in the interest of, you can read this, sovereignty and integrity, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, all this, right? Not naturally any right, Article 19 also, freedom of speech, is not an absolute right. It is a qualified right. There are reasonable restrictions to it, but reasonable restrictions. And our theme is about reasonable restrictions. So what has been seen is, and what Twitter is saying is, that fine, we will remove certain content, but most of it, what is coming to us, and once these things have been analyzed also, is that many of them are either in nature of journalistic or political in nature, sometimes even dissent of the government. So such posts should not be removed. Many of the tweets were those of the farmers. And naturally, farm law issue was there. So something that would have been critical of the government. So it means that the government can use the clause of Section 69 of the IT Act to remove content at will. Naturally, in public order, but it can be used to remove content. So it comes at the loggerheads, it comes in conflict with Article 19, freedom of speech and expression. Now, in the landmark Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, this case over here, the Supreme Court had held that Section 9 of 16, Section 69A of the IT Act is required. And logical, it is required. We need some regulation on this. Right, so this is required over here. Then what must be done? So one thing that we get is that because of this case over here, which is being filed in the Karnataka High Court, is that this thing will be in the public domain, and maybe this is a good opportunity for reforming the Section 69A of the IT Act so that we impose reasonable restrictions, not restrictions, reasonable restrictions. Right, so proportional action is taken. We need to define this law a bit more so that the problem does not take place. And that is the domain of the legislature, or the Supreme Court can also issue some directives over here. Now, besides this, we have this part over here which tells us about the regulation of the social media, the things that have been put in place. So most of the content that we consume over here is by the IT Act, right? So IT Act does it, and it is in 2000. It was launched, and naturally, long back, 22 years ago, this has to be updated time to time. So this is updated via government orders or rules. So executive does it. Now, most recently, we had the famous IT Rules 2021, which is also known as the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code. So intermediary is for any person who is managing your content, like Twitter is an intermediary between me who's posting a content and somebody who's reading your content. Okay, so this is for regulation of the intermediaries, right? We have a video on this also, a very detailed video actually. Now comes the article on employment. And this is again very, very important. The issue of employment, GS3, questions are repeatedly asked on this aspect. Further, we have had number of protests, be it with reference to the railway exams, or be it with this Agnipath scheme, also Agniveer thing. So we have to focus on employment. There is youth which needs employment. The things do not look very, very good. Okay, now before we go ahead, you see this part over here, more jobs are needed. I had shared this on the Telegram, right? So we get certain facts which you can utilize for your answer writing. So you can use this again and again. So it's important. It's a high value article. Now the government had announced a plan. Coming to the article, the government had announced a plan to create 10 lakh government jobs in the next 18 months. Right, so for next 18 months, they had said, so government jobs would be created. Within youth also, they want more of these government jobs. So this is there, but we have that at least, of the 40 lakh sanctioned posts, 22 are vacant. What is 22% of 40? Around, actually, it's 8 lakhs. So these are vacant also, so we can have the people employed over there. Right, so that is there. Now the thing is, you see, the government is actually saying that we will give you government jobs. We want government jobs, we will give you government jobs. So that is fine. But this thing was not raised before, that we will create more government jobs for you. This thing was never talked before. It seems it is only in the backdrop of the protests that have taken place. Because even previously, it is well acknowledged that there is a lot of vacancies. There are a lot of there is shortage of manpower, which the government has declared in various committees. But the government has never really complained about such shortages in the recent years. So they've never complained that we are having some problem with because of the limited manpower. So they never talked about it. But now they are talking about it. So it is the issue of the youth unemployment. And the government is saying, at least you join the government jobs, we'll provide you that. Thing is, besides government, we have the private sector also. Right? So that should also create jobs. And their performance has been very, very minimal. It's not desirable. So government jobs. So this is not sustainable, and we need more amount of jobs, and that too quality jobs. You would have seen protests by the ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, or teachers. So teachers on contract and not being given full-time jobs. And the contract thing is that those teachers are actually working with that particular school for a long duration of time, but to avoid avoid giving those social benefits, etc., they are employed on contracts. They keep getting renewed. It's a wrong practice. Likewise, ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, they work at a very low salary. The conditions are very, very poor. So they are not employed as full-fledged workers, but as honorary workers. So this is not good. This is not decent work. So quality of employment is also very, very important. That too in the government sector. Okay. Now, what this article says is that merely promising that we will create 10 lakh jobs in 18 months is too little. When we were preparing, there was this fact that we need to create 1.2 million jobs every year. So that is 12 lakh jobs. Now, naturally, 1.2 million jobs have not been created. So there is a backlog. Those people have to also be accommodated, which were not employed every year. More and more youth is joining the workforce. So according to the World Bank, 50 to 70 lakh workers are getting on board every year. Right? They're entering the labor market every year. They have to be accommodated. And how many jobs we are promising? 10 lakh jobs in 18 years. So even that earlier fact, 1.2 million jobs be created, is not adequate. We need to create more amount of jobs over here. Right? So that has to be done. And with that, we have to also focus on the quality of jobs. And naturally, the issue comes that the private sector also has not performed very well in the creation of jobs. So this has also been very dismal over here. And further, with the pandemic that has taken place, the financial stress on the health of the companies, again, their ability to create jobs is not good. So given the realities that we live in, we need to revamp employment policy. We need to create more jobs over here. And that jobs should not be just merely by privatizing the government structures. So it should not be just about that, but it should be about, we have to focus on labor intensive sectors, right? So labor intensive sectors have to be prioritized. The government needs to prioritize not just rural employment, but rural unemployment, but also urban unemployment. This is an area that is normally neglected. So they should also create certain infrastructure. For example, women are not able to participate. So for them also, like daycare centers should be set up for children to enable women to reduce their unpaid services. Then infrastructure should be created so that the country is, it attracts more amount of jobs, more number of companies come to a country, naturally more jobs would be created. But yes, labor intensive sectors have to be promoted, right? So that has to be done. By the way, government actually did say about the textile package and then also about the leather sector. But on ground, this seems too less. Even in the policy, it seems too less as compared to what other countries are doing. So that is there. If we don't address this, we'll be talking about the need for a universal basic income, which was again actually stated in the first economic survey when this BJP government had come in. Okay, the scale of municipal finances is inadequate. There was a question asked in the mains paper, and we discussed it also in the Mission Mains program. That is, municipal finances are predominantly coming from the grants from the state. So grants from the state, they are not financially viable. So it said that what are the other sources of revenue for the local bodies? It didn't say municipal finances actually. So with reference to this municipal finances, we get it. There is excessive dependence on grants. This article says that about 50% of the revenues of the local bodies is coming from the grants. And it's coming from the grant, so they're dependent on the grant. They are not able to generate revenue by itself. So naturally, the money is less, so it is fiscal deficit at the local body level. There is constraint in tax base expansion, that is bringing in more people under the ambit of tax collection for the local bodies, and weakening of institutional mechanisms. So these are the following issues. Okay. So what it is suggesting, it's basically talking about the GST thing and all. So what it's primarily suggesting is that first, there should be market instruments that allow for one, grant should be increased further. There should be market instruments like the government raising money from the market. For example, municipal bonds. So that should be there to raise revenue. They should be financially viable. Further, for tax base expansion, two things are there. Actually, just one thing. The state should be empowered. The state should empower the local bodies and grant more subjects for tax collection. So they should let go of their powers of taking the tax, and that power should be delegated to the local bodies. So that should be done. Okay, we also need to refine the tax collection system. And besides, there is also an issue that overall operations and maintenance expenses, all these things like schools, roads, etc., that are there. So when you use these services, do you pay any charge? No. But these things are being made all the time. This infrastructure is being created and there is a maintenance cost. So the expenses are increasing, but the resource base, the revenue base for the local bodies is not increasing at that rate. So one recommendation that has come by a high-powered expert committee that we should focus on user charges or non-tax revenues, right? So user charges should be enhanced. So anybody who uses the service, they should pay for it. So this could include services like water supply, solid waste management, transportation, wastewater management, etc. So these are inadequate. Okay, so this is a very, very important subject, important theme. Now we have something to do with the slow wheels of justice. So this is about judicial reforms. I think it's mainly talking about the pendency of cases. So delays and length, hanging fire. So 4.18 crore total pending cases. Shortage of judges, availability of judges, and with that regard, we have the NJSC bill and the memorandum of procedure as to how the judges would be appointed. The issues with the collegium system, that also can be taken up. Overcrowded prisons, okay, so that is there because of the under trials. Huge amount of under trials are there. About 67% of the people who are there in the prison are under trials. So they have not been held guilty, but they are still in the jail, plus the cases are pending. So this is problematic. The pending cases are piling up, right? So yeah, this is the overcrowded prisons, under trials share, so it makes sense. Okay, besides this, if we talk about judicial reform, what measures should be taken up? One is, besides court, we have to look at other systems like mediation and arbitration. So alternate dispute resolution has to be focused upon. Then access to justice. Access, how easy it is for a person to seek justice. So we want to focus on NALSA, Gram Nyalay. So all these institutions we have to focus. So beyond court, we have to look in other areas also. Okay, so this is it. I lost a highlight actually today. Now this is the mediation bill. It is telling us about this is an analysis on the mediation bill, which is telling us about the good and the bad. So the recent mediation bill was being discussed. It was being discussed by the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Law and Justice, which recommended substantial changes to the mediation bill. And it said that, first of all, what is mediation? Mediation and conciliation. So wait, I'll show you. Yeah. So mediation and conciliation are about two parties when they are in dispute, they should come together and discuss before going to the court. So by means of mediation and conciliation, those problems should be resolved. So it is kind of an alternate dispute resolution. So the system of mediation and conciliation would not be as complex as that of the judicial system. right? So that is there. Okay, both terms are actually very, very similar, and even uh, the lawmakers have actually used this word singularly. Okay, so it had said in the yesterday's news we had done that this law says that before going to the court, there should be a pre-litigation mediation. So this should be compulsory, and it also warned about that it should not be implemented in one go. It should be implemented in a phased manner, right? So that is what it was saying. In fact, read it for yourself. I'll share this, right? So read for yourself. I'll take me too much time if I start doing this. Okay. Police sees 75 drug issue, retail inflation, Zubair alt news issue. Next hearing on Gyan Vapi case. Grace missing in replica of emblem. EC starts distribution of ballot boxes for presidential election. Modi government is intimidating the judiciary, the independence of judiciary and executive, separation of powers. Okay, this is important. Center has no new data on child labor. So parliament is functioning, so committees are there. So committees were asking that what are you doing with reference to the child labor? So when this issue was being discussed over here, they said that we don't have this thing data. And they say that ever since the NCLP, the National Child Labor Project, which was monitoring this issue of child labor, has been merged with the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, we don't have information. And to be fair, NCLP is with the Labour Ministry and Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is with the Education Ministry. Right, so interesting. They don't have facts on this, and they say that we are relying on the information from the NGOs, which is not a proper assessment of the children in labor. Okay, so this is there, but it can be agreed that ever since the pandemic has taken place, a lot of children have fallen out of the education system, and the child labor has overall increased, and the children are more vulnerable today as they were in the past. Now, these are certain NGOs that are working over here. Okay. So we have to know now what is the NCLP and what is the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. So this is the PIB. So this is a central sector scheme. I hope you know the difference between central sponsored and central sector scheme. So central sector scheme, under the scheme, the district project societies are set up at the district level, right? So this is there. What do? They look into the aspect of the age group of 9 to 14 years, right? So 9 to 14 years is looked into, and they are enrolled into the NCLP special training centers where they are provided bridge education, vocational training, midday meals, etc. So that is provided. So naturally, the children who were employed gone into the child labor, they are rehabilitated. Then, for children in the age group of 5 to 8 years are directly linked to the formal education via close coordination with Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. So, you know what, we are getting measures that the state is taking to deal with the issue of child labor. Then it tells us about a portal named Pencil, which is platform for effective enforcement of no child labor. Fine. Now, what is Samagra? Now, you see this is under Ministry of Labor and Employment. Then we have the Samagra Shiksha. So, Union Budget 2018 had proposed to treat school education holistically with segmentation from pre-nursery to 12. So, Samagra Shiksha. Now, Samagra Shiksha, the term Samagra actually means for all. So, education for. So, it is about this, and the NCLP has been merged under this. And it subsumes, so 3 schemes that were there prior to this, they have been introduced under the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, that is Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, so middle stage, and teacher education. Fine. So we have it. Railways to go or check call records of loco pilots. Okay. India, Brazil navies may collaborate. I was hoping, and they are collaborating. Both these countries have Scorpion class of submarines. So these are diesel electric submarines, and they have been imported via French. So both countries have it. So they are working together. Indian Brazil naval exercise. Now I was hoping that we can get the name of this exercise. So that is not there. So they are in the negotiation stage. So let's see when it comes. Right. So Sri Lanka news. Rishi Sunak is wanting to be the prime minister and the leader of the Conservative Party. Same the telescope thing. Comply with the ruling. US tells China, so the South China Sea issue. So we keep referring to this. Okay. Industrial output jumps 19.6%. So this is the IIP details. So IIP logs fastest growth in 12 months, led by consumer durables and capital goods. Quite interesting. We have unemployment data, inflation, and then the industrial output is increasing. So this is more of a statistical issue actually. So let's see, previous year, base year effect would also be there. Okay, impact of inflation on India's poor, negligible, interesting viewpoint over here. And so it impacts middle class, it seems, but not poor. Okay, so oil slips on strong dollar, weak outlook. So oil prices are increasing. Then the sports news. Right. So this concludes the session. So thank you for streaming in to our channel IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. So bye-bye, take care and all the best.